Hello, continuing on today with our exploration of Akasha, the toroidal field, and ascension. We're going to look at how shadow work, embodiment, and spiritual bypassing can actually all be the same thing. Very often one is pedestalized, venerated, and the others denounced, and whatever side the individual is on, that one's always the one that's venerated, right? Whatever is important to us at the moment. We need to look at the path with a much longer view, and this will help us to understand how different mechanisms of training are all appropriate at different times, and even within the same practice session. So this begins with understanding how what we do with the mind, the mental space, the mental organization affects the astral field and body and affects the physical body. This is, of course, affected through the energetic medium, whatever spectrum of the vibrational scale one is working on. So, mental space, right? When we move the mind further away from the body, we create a stretch of the mind. And of course, through that, there will be a stretch of the body. The field will expand to meet the space that the mind is occupying. And there will be an associated stretch of the body and the fascia. This is where you get into the body training, the fascia training. Now, this serves a very important purpose. And we need to be very cognizant of what we're doing with the mind. What space are we occupying? Because the schooling of the astral body and the schooling of the astral energy will, of course, organize around what our habits are. And the training is to elevate the habits, right? To evolve them from lower density habits of mind, of emotion, and body to more refined ones. And we'll get into this more as we go through this video. So if we are, say, using an ascension-based model that involves suspending above the crown, going upwards or rising, elevating, this is wonderful, especially to help open up the central channel, right? And the issue is if we attach to this, we build a body, right? A physical body. We build an astral habit that is always going up. And this is where you get many issues in Kundalini practice, or Kundalini practitioners very often get stuck in this because the upward movement of the energy becomes the core focus. And not only is there the upward movement, but you're also working through all kinds of exercises that are unlocking vaster stores of more and more high octane energy. So we want to be cognizant of this. Now, there is certainly merit in this, and it is much easier to understand, to perceive, and to conceptualize how energy works and how the bodies work, how the ascension process works when we move it through space. When we go, okay, the lower, right, the middle, the upper, and then in through, say, the interpersonal point to infinity. This is a wonderful framework. It helps us to understand what it is we're working with. Apologies for the plane if you can hear it. I'm in a giant field mountain place here, but this is also where all the people learn how to fly planes. So hopefully all of what we'll experience is hearing the plane and not having it crash into me. So mental space is very important. Now, if we want to understand this, very simple focusing exercises of the eye can open this door. That would be focusing on something near, like your hand in front of your face, focus on your finger, then focus on something, 20 yards away, 20 meters away, a meter away, 20 meters away, and just go back and forth, and you'll start to feel how your stretch of the mind, where your attention is, will actually stretch the fascia. The eye muscles change and contract, and this is not just in the eye. There's what I call the peripheral field, which in some Tai Chi traditions they call the working with the Shen very often. They look at that, and this is a very interesting thing. Now, it's not just the eye, and it's not just in the head. This is the whole perceptual field, as we've discussed in a previous video. What we're doing, what we're tuning our perceptions to. Okay, so the upwards model has merit. It's easier to understand and to conceptualize than the depth point model, which takes us through the toroidal field, through the center of the torus, through infinity, through eternity. Because the depth point is a little trickier to understand, it's often not used as much. Now, you have the same errors with depth point. Let's say instead of using interpersonal point above the crown, you're using the solar plexus. What happens then? Well, then you get the body that starts to form instead of upward starts to very often collapse and start to congeal in and around the solar plexus. Or if you're doing more of the Taoist model, you see a lot of practitioners starting to fold into the lower dantian near the, just below the navel. And so this is the exact same as the upward ascension model in that the body is creating an energetic habit, physically, astrally, mentally, to pull everything, to magnetize everything towards the point of attention. So what point of attention are you using? That is the first aspect of this that we need to comprehend, because once these habits are built, it takes a lot to undo them. And very often practitioners find that stage to be it can be very valuable. It's a very destructive part of the process, because you have to look at your pride in practice, your pride in the spiritual path. And our pride in the spiritual path is always a big hurdle to get over. And this is it's a wonderful way to do it, to encounter that pride. So, mental space, very important. How the body builds and organizes based on the mental shape and attention, very important. So put some attention into this so that you can move beyond it. Now, the elevation of consciousness, when this is being described, whether it's from lower to higher, whether it is from more dense to less dense, from density to lightness, this is all pointing at a movement from limited to expanded identity fractals of consciousness. So we perceive ourselves as something very small, and anyone who's done a little bit of meditation will, I'm sure, have had the experience of suddenly the identity which is attached to something, it cracks off that attachment. And suddenly it's like, oh, you feel so light, you're not holding that anymore. You didn't realize you were holding on to that particular layer of density. But once it cracks off, right, differentiation is the key to awareness and the key to learning. So it cracks off, suddenly you're not holding on to that particular density. And oh my God, your identity has expanded. As we progress, this is the same as a thinking that I am my finger, only to realize that the finger is part of my hand and other fingers, only to realize that my hand is part of an arm, that my arm is part of a torso, that this torso is part of a full body, that this full body is part of greater systems of information, of energy, of consciousness. You have the sun behind my head, right? It is lighting up and organizing all the astral body, all the waters, the body lighting off different processes, timestamps, on and on it goes. The earth beneath the feet, you start to expand and expand and expand. Now expansion, of course, we're working from a directional, but through that we have to work through omnidirectional first. Expansion outwards is the same as expansion inwards, because we are working from the viewpoint of that which is infinite. The personal Akashic consciousness, the personal infinite consciousness, eternal consciousness, and its attunement within as and of the universal Akashic consciousness, we might say, and beyond. So identity fractals and movement from identifying with small density to refinement, lightness. This is really what's being looked at when we talk about elevation of consciousness. Now, this is very important. Anything that we have worked, anything that is dense is subsumed by the next layer that is lighter. It is not discarded, it is subsumed by, which means it is a part of that which is greater. Like I said, the finger is part of the hand. I don't recognize the hand and the hand consciousness and cut off my finger and go, oh, nope, not that. That which is of the lower is subsumed by that which is of the higher when we're exploring this. Very, very important, so that we don't fall into the trap of spiritual bypassing or of ignoring and demonizing that which is more dense. It has to be equalized with, from and through equanimity, which lets us work from that place of Akasha, right? See the video Secrets of the Akashic Library, Ascension Secrets of the Akashic Library. We discussed this in detail. So you have to work through the Akasha and the emptiness underneath each layer. That gives you the sliding scale so that you don't demonize anything or get stuck on anything, whether it is of more refinement or of less refinement. It is all eventually one and the same. Lower is always baked into the higher. It's never discarded. It's simply not identified with. Now, this is where you get into the, if we are misinterpreting this, not from an experiential standpoint and an explorative experiential standpoint, right? We never want to define the experience and limit it. From an explorative experiential standpoint, I recognize as I'm saying this, all these words are in contrast to the message here. When we're exploring this is where dissociative disorders, if we attach to the higher and demonize the lower, dissociative disorder, spiritual bypassing, this comes into play, where it's very easy to confuse apathy and indifference for equanimity. Apathy is an attempt, indifference is an attempt to control the flux of the astral body and the astral field, to control responsiveness. So it's imposition, and this leads very often to sickness. This is much, much different than equanimity, which is a freeing of the identity from attachment to the elements, the astral elements, to the phase of the yin-yang. Freeing of the identity from that allows the elements to move, to ebb, flow, flux, to dance. As this is happening, they are equalizing, constantly finding equilibrium through that wave, through that movement. Equanimity takes the imposing, the tyrannical crown off of that dance, so that it is able to move and able to dance. When the identity of a lower form is compressing it, none of that energy can move. So this is of vital importance. We don't want to be in the phase of trying to control ourselves. We want to allow for the freedom of equanimity, right? Freedom is a higher octave of control. If we are free from something, we do not need to try to impose ourselves on it or control it. So this takes us into the shadow work and embodiment aspect of this. Very often, those who demonize spiritual bypassing and lightness and refinement will pedestalize shadow work and embodiment. And why is this? Because, if I think this, I'm right. And this is always going to be an issue. So shadow work, embodiment, this is a double-edged sword. The obsession of working on myself. This is highly addictive. And you, I'm sure, will notice this as a phase that we all go through on the spiritual path, which when someone is obsessed with this aspect of the practice and stuck in this phase, everything is about themselves. It's all about me. Who? My favorite person. My favorite person, me, is working on me. And it is very difficult to move or expand or dissolve or resolve a problem from within the problem, right? We need to not get stuck on this. This is a necessary part of the practice. It builds a deep understanding of the black and white mirror, which is necessary, right? The soul mirror work is very, very necessary. But what we are practicing when we are engaged in this, what's happening in the background? There's the exercise that we might be doing, or the attentiveness that we're exploring, or that we're using to explore different aspects of the path or ourselves, on and on it goes. But what is behind that? What's occurring during that? This is crucial, because if we don't acknowledge this, we will bake in all kinds of unintended consequences into what we're doing. Okay? So this is a double-edged sword, and it is no different than spiritual bypassing, because the thing that is doing the work, the thing that is doing is the problem. The problem isn't your issues. The problem is you. It's always, that's the project. And that's the thing we're moving beyond, is identifying with a small conglomerated mess of stagnancy. The identity fractals have to grow. How can you grow an identity fractal and experience yourself as cosmic, and experience the cosmic as this, and have those disappear, have infinity and eternity expose themselves through the release, the surrender of attachments to time, the attachments to space, if you are obsessing over time and space in this particular little box that you're hanging out in, which is you? So, shadow work and embodiment, a double-edged sword. The soul mirror work is necessary, and if we look at this from the perspective of I always refer back to the Tibetan Tonglen practice, because I think it's one of the very useful ones to work through the separative habits that one has in relation to perception and the world around us. So that's a good place to start. Instead of getting obsessed with perfecting my black and white mirror and balancing my black and white mirror, it happens in the background. It happens automatically, because through we could say an ascension-based practice, the resolution of the little self, this little amalgamation of stuff called Nathan, into eternity and infinity, that is the goal. So the soul mirror work happens as a byproduct of that. And I find this to be one of the most organic ways to growing through this. When the practice behind the practice is self-obsessed, regardless of what you are working on, you are consolidating and increasing the tensions, strengthening the tensions that are identifying with this lower self. Okay? This stage is where many practitioners' progress stops, right? Because it's all about my favorite person, me. I'm the best. Everything's about me, therefore that's where it stops. It has to resolve into infinity and eternity. Okay? So, once again, spiritual bypassing, shadow work, embodiment, it's all self-obsession in one way or another. It is creating barriers because of the self that is doing the work, right? This gets into, all kinds of exercises and training that are based around the resolution of this lower identity fallacy. Okay? So literal interpretation of words is always going to lead us astray when we attach to them. If you look at the Tao Te Ching, right, the way that can be spoken is not the immortal Tao. That which can be conceived of, that which can be conceived of is not infinity, is not eternity. Words always fall short because the conception of a thought is a form. That's why it's called a thought form. And that is literally the opposite of infinity. So we need to keep that in mind so that we practice and refine through the alchemical process without judgment, without imposing meaning and importance onto all our little experiences that we might have, whether positive or negative. It's so easy to judge the practice, to judge the progress, and the identity fractal always has to break and pop off to encompass that much more. Not just more, but also more. This is about many spectrums of the vibrational scale that all exist and coexist in the exact same place, in the exact same time, and are timeless and spaceless, right? That's the key here. So from this, we can look at true non-duality that is something that only can ever be pointed towards through the negatives, which is why you get sayings like neti neti, not this, not that. We're looking at the space in between the attachments of either and or, in between the attachments to past and future, to here and there. It's all in the same spot. So this requires a breaking of the conceptualizing cognitive mind and framework, and that allows us to actually progress through this phase of the training so we can really fall through the toroidal field and fall through the tensions of time and space into Akasha, truly. And that's where this little video ends. If you're interested in training, please check out the website. There is also a retreat coming up this June and in future as well. So please check out the details there if you're interested in doing some training. All right, hope you found this helpful, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for your time. Bye.